Welcome to Education Forum. I'm Herman Badillo, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the City University. Today we have a very special program because my guest is Chancellor Harold Levy, who is the new Chancellor of the Board of Education. Chancellor Levy is a graduate of Cornell University, where he got his bachelor's degree in industrial and labor relations, and he got a law degree from Cornell as well. He also got a degree from Oxford University on politics, philosophy, and education. So that's a great background for being Chancellor of the City Board of Education. I want to thank you for being here, and we want to talk about programs that have to do with the City University, but we have to talk first about the summer school program, because that is the program that everybody's concerned about, including me, because as you know, I have been one of the strongest opponents of social promotion over the years, not just in the past 7 years. What is the status of the program now?
Well, as I announced, we're going to have a summer program, and we're going to adhere to the policy of no social promotion. But in the process of doing that, we're also going to cut back some on the number of kids that are going to be in the summer school. And the reason why we have to cut back is I want to be sure that we have teachers who can teach the kids who we bring into the program. So very simply, we're not going to have kids from the parochial schools or the private schools. We're not going to have kids who are so-called non-mandatory summer school students. And it's sort of a funny euphemism because, in fact, there is no compulsory education law that applies during the summer. It's completely voluntary. The only thing I can hold over a kid who we decide ought to go to the summer program is if you don't go, you're not going to graduate. And those kids are going to be in the program. So we're still going to have a very large program, over 250,000 kids.
Right, but every student who is not performing at grade level in the public schools will be in the summer program, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Secondly, why isn't it a full summer program for the months of July and August for a period of 6 to 8 hours?
It would be wonderful to have a summer program that was a real summer program. This isn't a summer program, it's a July program. We get 100 hours for these kids, that's all, 100 hours. And that means that we get, for example, 5 weeks, 4 hours a day.
No, but why was it cut back to that? I had thought, and most people had thought, it'd be a summer program for July and August.
That would be wonderful, but we never had the money for that. The mayor didn't give the money, the state doesn't give money.
So it's not the teachers, it's the money.
Absolutely. On the issue of, is it going to be all summer or just July? It never was going to be all summer. It was only going to be July, and what I've done is I've said within July, it's going to be a fewer number of kids.
How much money would it have taken to do it for the whole 2 months, July and August? I mean, how much additional money?
On the order, I mean, I haven't tried to cost it out, but I would say ballpark another 100, 120 million, rough numbers. You see, look, the game is we right now have 1,100,000 school kids. There's a calculation as to how much money you have that you can bring the kids into the summer program so as to bring them up to speed. We've made the decision we can take in about 250,000 kids, rough cut. The reality is that if you take the bottom, 250,000, the next 50,000 up, they don't have a lot to write home about either. I mean, if we had the money, we would take them in too.
No, I'm concerned about the bottom 250,000 over a longer period of time.
I understand. One thing that people don't understand, Herman, I know you do, but one thing that people don't understand is that this is a very short period in the heat of the summer. And if I've got a kid, for instance, who hasn't learned to read, is in the 7th grade, and basically hasn't learned to read since they've been with the public school system, that child is going to be given to me for the summer, for July, not for the summer, but for July, and I'm supposed to make that kid learn to read. Okay. Now, the likelihood of that is not great. On the other hand, kids who, for instance, flunk the Regents exam in the high schools, and they flunk it in June, then take the summer program, which is actually more like 6 or 8 weeks, and then take the exam again, half of those kids pass the exam the second time around.
Okay.
Now, that's a good program.
Okay, but my wife has the first kid. She teaches the 7th grade.
I know she
and
does.
And she has kids who have not been performing all year, and some of them who have not been performing in previous years.
Right.
Now, the chances are, it seems to me, that those kids will not be able to make up a whole year in the 5 weeks or so at 3 hours a day, right?
Absolutely.
So then what happens to those students? Will they be given a test at the end of the 5 weeks?
Yes.
And then, since they probably won't be able to make up the whole year, they'll probably fail the test, right?
Some of them.
Well,
I don't want to.
No, but I mean, you know, the
Some of them will, some of them won't.
Okay, so
those who don't.
what happens to those who fail the test?
Well,
That's my
let's
question.
take it a piece at a time. The point of summer program is it's a remediation thing.
Right.
It's if some kid hasn't learned enough to be passed on to the next grade. Social promotion meant we pass them on no matter what.
Right.
Here, there's a second chance. It's not a big second chance because, as you point out, Herman, it's only 5 weeks.
Right.
Okay. But those kids who can't make it even after the 5 weeks, and there will be considerable number,
Right.
there will be programs in September to try and assist them, to try and bring them up. And there are different programs in each district. Simply putting them back in the same classes and repeating, I think, is a recipe for disaster.
That's the question I want to
I
answer.
think that's a recipe for
Right.
disaster. But
So
what
there'll
we
be
are
special
doing,
classes.
there'll be special support
Right.
mechanisms to
Okay.
try and help them and push them up in the areas where they need support. But it's not a perfect solution because even there, we don't have the ability to, say, put them in a remedial class. If you simply put the kid who's failed once back into the same class and repeat it,
No,
this is
that
not a
won't work.
situation
Right.
where repetition is a good teacher.
Now, the criticism last year, where there was a pilot program on eliminating social promotion, was that the test that was given at the end allowed the kids to pass who only reached the 15th percentile, 1-5. And most people and the press felt that that was too low a percentage. Have you determined what kind of test you're going to have here?
There are different tests in different grades. For example, in the K through 3 part, there are no real tests at all, and there's no social promotion policy. We're going to promote the kids from kindergarten to 1st grade. It's silly to think that you're going to keep a kid back in kindergarten. In the 3 through 8 period, and let me just say, the justification for doing summer program for the K through 3 kids, K through 2 kids, is you want to keep them reading. You want to keep them involved in reading.
Right.
And the more reading, the more time on task, the greater the likelihood is that they're going to learn. For the kids at the other end, for the high school kids, it's what I said before. There they have to take Regents exams. If they take the Regents exam and they flunk it the first time, in New York State, the average who then pass it the second time is 55%. Historically in New York City, it was only 45%. Last summer, it was actually 60%. So that's a great program, not because we still have half the kids failing, but because half those kids who were failing get picked up, and they go on to the next grade. That, I think, is an easy one to support. The kids in the middle, the justification is to minimize the September effect. Every teacher knows that when the child comes in September, they've forgotten everything. They can't remember what their name is. They don't remember what they've learned. And so it takes the teachers a considerable amount of time to bring them back up. Even having those kids just in July has an impact. It holds them up. It prevents any more fallback, which is what would otherwise happen in the summer.
Now, the biggest dropout rate, as you know, is in the 9th and 10th grades, where, you know, huge percentage, especially of black and Hispanic kids drop out. Is there a special program to deal with them?
Well, let me tell you why. This is a great hidden secret of the system. Let me clue you in. Let me tell your audience. Historically, there was social promotion throughout the entire rest of the system, but not in 9th grade and not in 10th grade, because 1/3 of all 9th graders were repeaters. And in New York City, 1/3 of all 10th graders were also repeaters. So the reason why there was greater dropout in those 2 years is simply you had the cadre of kids who'd already been left back once or twice. And the data here is exactly what you'd expect. It's intuitive. You get left back once, the likelihood of your ultimately dropping out goes up about 30%.
And also
you get left back twice, and it's more likely than not, that you'll never graduate.
And also they reached the age where they could drop out.
Right.
They couldn't drop out.
Right, you can age out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a terrible embarrassment to me that, I mean, the data on how many kids actually get through our system is a terrible embarrassment to me. Right now, rough cut, half the kids make it to senior year on time. Only half. 17% drop out. In our current senior class, here's the data. 50% got there on time. 17% of those who started in 1996 have already dropped out. and 30% are still somewhere in the pool. Now, that's not a terrible thing, because when you look at the data 7 years out or so, for kids who actually get left back 3 times, that 30% number generates a whole bunch of additional people who ultimately graduate. So that's not a terrible thing. It's not great, but I'll take it, because I'd rather have graduates than people who flunk.
Now, before you took this job, you were a member of the Board of Regents.
I was.
And you voted for having higher standards and requiring that all the kids who graduate from high school have a Regents diploma.
Right.
Are you sorry about that?
Not at all. Not at all. Look, I've been in private business, my entire life. And the one thing that's clear to me is I know the quality of the kids who come out of the system and who we have to hire. And if you don't have the skills that the Regents call for, you're not going to get hired. You're not going to be successful. And we no longer have a society where you can just work with your hands. I mean, there was a time where there was this whole industrial base in the country that could prop up the kids who weren't so good at what we call book smarts. Well, that's not the case anymore. And in the world of technology and the information superhighway, if you can't read and you can't do math at a level that the Regents have determined you need to, you're not going to make it. And we're doing nobody a service to give out diplomas that are valueless, that don't indicate this is a reader, this kid can do math. Okay. That's what a diploma means.
We'll be back after these announcements.
Do you think you have the power to change the world?
I can change the world one child at a time.
I know I can make a difference in those children's lives.
I teach.
I teach.
Yes, they're teachers, but to the kids they reach, they're heroes.
I teach.
Do you have the power to wake up young minds, to be someone's hero? Teach, to make an impact on our future. Call 1-800-45-TEACH. Be a teacher, be a hero.
We're back today with Chancellor Harold Levy, the Chancellor of the Board of Education, the City of New York. You've been Chancellor now for about 3 months. What do you find is the biggest problem that you have?
Well, it's not much different than what I said on the first day I was here. I said there were 3 things I wanted to fix because I thought those were the 3 biggest problems. First, I said I needed to run a summer program and run it well. Second, I said I needed to do teacher recruitment and staff recruitment generally, principals too. And third, I needed to get an evaluation mechanism out to make sure that the superintendents knew how I would hold them accountable. Those are still my priorities, and those are still addressing the 3 major issues. Social promotion, we've got to deal with the fact that kids are not passing the Regents standards, and we've got to get them up to the Regents standards because otherwise they don't get diplomas, and that's terrible.
Well, there, of course, we worked out, the 2 of us, the City University and you, a program known as College Now, where we can help you because we can begin to work with the students in the 9th grade in high school and ensure that there will be fewer dropouts from 9th and 10th grade, more graduating, but graduating in a way that they don't have too much remedial work to do when they come to us at CUNY. So I want to thank you for working that out, because truth is, I try to get Chancellor Crew to agree to that program for the past 2 years, and you agreed to it in 2 weeks, so that's pretty good.
Well, you're being overly generous, because the truth of the matter is you pushed this program for many years, and it's a good program, and if it hadn't been for your pushing, it wouldn't have happened. So I'm in debt to you, and so are the kids who are going to get the benefit out of this.
Yeah.
College Now is a great program. We're going to do other things, as you know, together. I've already had conversations with Matt Goldstein about getting a program for 5th year of high school, and we've jointly appointed a deputy to the Chancellor for CUNY, for college recruitment, and to the Board of Education.
To coordinate all the work
Exactly.
we do. Yeah.
To coordinate the work between CUNY and the board. And that's just, I mean, we have talked about in educational circles having a K through 16 system for 20 years. And because there's now a moment in time where we can glom these 2 systems together and not worry about the legislation, we now have one person who reports to both of us, and in an instant we've got a K through 16 system.
Now, the other problem that we have in common is teacher training, because we train most of the teachers for the Board of Education, and unfortunately a lot of them are not too good. So we are improving our programs at CUNY, and you find that you need to improve the quality of your teachers, right?
You're being kind. We have a terribly serious problem on teacher quality, and you know that, and we both know that is the most important issue in education today. I mean, if you had to scrap all these great programs and just focus on one thing, it's teacher education, teacher training, and teacher professional development. There's no getting away from it. And what's interesting is the governor's on board, the union's on board, certainly all the educators are on board. We're all focused on professional development, and that's critical. So I think what we need to do in terms of the City University and us is, I know that Matt's talking about bringing all of that together under a unified roof, and I think that's
right,
terrific.
because we have a very good record at some of the colleges, but a terrible record at some of the others, where the teachers who get a degree in education can't even pass the teacher's exam in English, and that has to stop.
And we know that how you score on the NCATE exam and how you do as an undergraduate determines how well your kids are going to do on their exams. Well, with that piece of knowledge, I've made the conscious decision I'm going to start looking elsewhere too. I've gone to CUNY, I've met with all the private colleges in the state of New York. The irony here is that New York State is a net exporter of teachers. I need those teachers, and I want the best. We deserve the best in New York City, and I'm going to get them.
Well, Randy Weingarten was here some time ago, and she's very pessimistic about the system's ability to come up with what she says is something like 54,000 teachers in the next few years. Do you think it can be done?
We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. We will get it done for the simple reason we're not going to have empty classrooms. I mean, part of this is a supply and demand issue, and part of this is also working out the teacher rules. The supply and demand issue is we need to pay up to have comparable wages so that people don't get drawn off to the suburbs. Right now, we're underpaying our teachers by thousands of dollars, and that's got to stop. On the other hand, I need to have the freedom to assign teachers in an effective way so as to maintain class size and be able to get flexibility. Those two things go hand in glove.
Well, you have the demand problem too, because all the facts that I have indicate that the migration of Hispanics from Latin America and the Caribbean is going to continue, and from other parts of the world, so that the people who come over, like me, are young people when we come over, and they are people who are likely to have more children. So therefore, you have to plan for even more students in the years to come.
It's funny, as you know, I used to serve on a commission on school facilities, and
That's
one of
why
the
I brought
things
it
that
up.
we looked at was how do you deal with overcrowding. And I came to the conclusion that, I made two conclusions about our predictions, our demographic predictions as to how big how big an incoming class we're going to have. What determines it? It was interesting. One, you can do pretty good predicting out 5 years. Why? Because the child is born, and then you know those kids are coming into the program because they're being raised at age 1, age 2, and so on. You can just count up. That's one way. The other thing, though, that, and this is not terribly scientific, but I tell you, it's a function, our schools, the size of our incoming class is a function of world relations, foreign relations. Why? When there's an uproar in the Dominican Republic, we get a whole bunch of Dominican folks. When there's an uproar in Russia, you know, Brighton Beach suddenly floods. And it's no different than when my parents came to this country. When there was a war in Germany and the Nazis were out killing my relatives, parents fled. And where did they come to? They came to New York City. And one of the reasons was it's because it had a fabulous school system. We can have that system again.
But can you plan adequately to ensure that you don't have the overcrowded conditions that we had a couple of years ago?
Well, and we still have. And we still have. I mean, look, in Queens, there are schools that are embarrassingly overcrowded. In Washington Heights, there's still terrible overcrowding. We haven't cured the overcrowding problem. What's in fact happened is that the incoming flow has begun to level out, but we can have no assurance that that's going to continue. I mean, right now, we've got this huge bulge going through the system. You know, it's like a snake that swallows a mouse. You know, you can see it go right through. And we're not close to solving the problem of adequate facilities. I don't even have enough money right now to ensure that there are laboratories in every Regents class that's a lab course. I don't have enough money now to ensure that every child gets regular training in computers. I don't have enough money now to ensure that there's a gymnasium or an outdoor space for every child to play in. I've got kids in trailers. I've got kids in modulars. These are not great solutions. Problem's still there.
It's not likely you're going to get a revision in the state formula, is it? Where you can get some additional money based upon the percentage of kids.
I'm not giving up on that.
No?
I think the place we have to fight is to make sure that the legislature understands that we're going to hold them accountable. I mean, this is the legislature is very narrowly balanced, and if New Yorkers focus on this issue, we can move that balance. I mean, this is everyone has now decided education is the key issue. Vice President Gore, Governor Bush.
Yeah, the president, everyone.
They're all into education now. Well, now's the time to say what we really need. And what we really need are better qualified teachers so we can compete again for the best, and sufficient facilities so that we don't have kids sitting on one another in classes of 34. I'll give you one piece of data that just always troubles me on this. In New York City, in the Regents course for history and geography, we have 30 kids in a class, on average. In the other big four cities, Rochester, Yonkers, Buffalo, Syracuse, they have 26 kids in a Regents course. In the rest of the state, putting to one side the big five cities, we have 22 kids. Well, what fairness is there in that? I want to have the same amount of state aid that Syracuse gets. I want to have at least as much state as the state average. The big four cities get $2,000 more in state aid than we do. Well, why? Why? It's not like they need it more. That I find unacceptable. I'm not ready to give up on that fight.
No, and listen, I'm not either, but we've been fighting that fight, as you know, for a very long time.
And it's time that we win it.
Yeah, well, welcome to welcome to the growing army that we have to support that.
And growing it is.
Yeah. Let me talk about school governance, because you now have the authority, because of a law that was passed a couple of years ago, as Chancellor, to overrule some of the school boards and to appoint directly the district superintendents. And you've been having some arguments with the school boards. How's that coming along?
Well, the governance change that you're describing is not quite as far as all that. What I can do is, if a board acts improperly, I can set it aside, and I can replace superintendents under certain I can replace them. That is to say, I can displace the fellow who's there, or lady.
Yeah, right.
What I can't do is put in my own choice, at least not on a permanent basis. And I've used that power quite willingly, because I have a very low threshold for incompetence or malevolence. And I'm going to do what I need to do. There's one school district, I'm not suggesting that they were malevolent, one school district where they violated Chancellor Crew's orders 3 times. They then dismissed the superintendent who was in place and replaced the person with someone else, all in violation of the Chancellor's rules, and I called them in and we had a conversation about it. And afterwards I replaced them. And I also replaced the superintendent. And the superintendent who I put in there is going to do a great job.
Now, what power would you like to have? If you could expand your powers?
In an ideal world, I think the way to do this is to put more emphasis on the Chancellor and less on the district boards. And I say that in part because the district boards get such low voter turnout, and in some cases don't even have enough candidates, that there is a relatively low level of community involvement through that mechanism. There are a lot of other mechanisms whereby we've got parents all over the schools, and I think that's the kind of thing that can be fostered through the Chancellor. But I also say to you, Herman, I don't really want to get into the politics of the pulling and pushing of how we set up governance. And I resist that because I'm an interim chancellor. I'm looking at a few very narrow items. There's some things I can do and I can do well, and that an interim can do that a permanent couldn't. And those are what I'm doing.
Suppose you were a permanent chancellor. What would you like to say you would like to accomplish in the next 5 years?
Well, with all due respect, I'm going to duck that question, and I'll tell you why. If I say to the world, here's what I'm going to do, and what I would do, sounds like a campaign speech. I'm not going to do that. If I go down that road,
well, tell me this:
there lies folly.
What does the system need most? Forgetting about who the chancellor might be.
I've made my pitch. I think the system needs more quality teachers. more than anything else, we need to upgrade the people who are not certified. Look, we have 78,000 teachers in this system. Everyone knows we have 1,100,000 school kids. The numbers that people don't know is that we have 78,000 teachers, of whom 11,000 are not certified. And that means they could be, you know, have a bachelor's degree from City University, get plunked down in a third grade class and say, teach these kids how to read. That's crazy. What I want to do is get rid of the uncertified teachers, either by giving professional development to those who are in the schools and are good and can be made to make the grade, or move out the rest. Because if you can't pass this, it's time to get somebody else. And what I want to do is get people who are certified. I want them to have pedagogical knowledge, and I want them to have deep subject matter knowledge, because it's abundantly obvious that if you have that, you can get the kids to perform. And without it, you can't.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You can reach us by email at our website, www.cunytv.cuny.edu, or write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. We look forward to hearing from you.